Hey, what's up, universe? It is 12:33 p.m. on Sunday, June 4th, 2023. So this will be a fairly decently long live, just to give you a heads up. I'm going to cover a number of different things. So for those of you that have been following me, I had experienced the snake on Friday, and then there was the full moon yesterday, and I wrote intentions and did a fire ritual and released those, and so there's symbolism going on with that, and I've just been going through feeling going through the change of employment, and even the kind of language and like with the opportunity that I have right now with the contract with that consulting group. It's not meant to be a full-time gig. They're very cool with like being super flexible about like when I jump in, and there's a lot of flexibility. So basically there's not a lot of firmness or stability in that context of employment, and I'm just calling that out because it plays into the role of other things that I'm going to be talking about that I've been considering and thinking and kind of feeling into, and honestly things that have been coming up to me for years, and kind of how it's all unfolding. So I have a lot of like drawings today. I have like 4 pages of like things that were coming to me today, and to tie into what I was just talking about, this idea of teaching has been coming up for years. Wasn't sure what to teach. Sex has been coming up in the sense of like to talk about, and there's just a connection that I have with it, and it's not from a place of how do I say, like irreverence or anything. Like it's just like, let's talk about it, you know what I mean? Like, and then the way that I relate to it in the creation, the way that I see life unfold. So it's definitely part of my philosophy. So there's this obvious reverence towards it, and there's a respect and a curiosity in this. It's not from a place that others may, or that you may originally or intentionally or initially perhaps think that I might be coming from. Another thing that I'll just kind of get into, I wrote a post, and I'm just kind of going through bullet points in the beginning here real quick. I wrote a post on LinkedIn because I found it interesting working with ChatGPT. I fed it, like a block of my beliefs, and then this is part of me like reevaluating myself professionally. And I was like, I've used the word practitioner. I'm like, okay, I practice, my beliefs here. It's a lifestyle. And I started just recently at the beginning of the year or so, started using the word creative, like, oh, I'm a creative. I never had that relationship to myself before. And I was like, oh, actually, that I can feel that alignment, that aligns, like I'm a creative. So I started moving from, I'm an IT guy, right? That's what I was for the longest time, for decades, an IT guy. And that had a certain feeling, a certain identity, a certain context, a certain frequency, and certain experiences because of the way I made it mean. I mean, that an IT guy to somebody else, different feeling, different context, different experiences. For me, though, that was my identity, and I had a certain context and experience around that. It took me a long time to transition and establish in a relationship that I could actually feel within inside myself of like, oh, I'm a creative. And so that opened up a lot different, like a whole different context, a whole different feeling. And I've started to experience a lot different things, like some different things for sure. And just within like the last maybe 2 days, I started entertaining the idea of like an artist. And I was like, okay, like an artist of what, you have a musician, they're an artist of that. I think I mentioned this in the previous video. So ChatGPT was, I fed it in my beliefs, and I'm like, this person views themselves as an artist, what would they be an artist of? And it was really cool to see the response. I can't remember everything verbatim, but basically like a practitioner of life, and just I don't know, it was really cool. It was really interesting. I would just invite you to read it if you're curious. I thought about reading it here, but I'm not going to do that. I'll just invite you to read it. What that interaction did, though, is it inspired me to really connect with more about, like, okay, these characteristics are being reflected back to me. I asked what type of leader this person would be, and so I was like, okay. And then I even asked about, like, what type of professions would be in alignment, and it's like, oh, well, this person, like, could be a coach, an author, a podcaster, like, do workshops, volunteer in certain ways. And I'm like, done that, like, in a way. Like, I haven't hosted workshops, I've done a podcast, I've written a book, or I've co-authored a book, I've volunteer, like, all these kinds of things. And I'm like, all right, well, it's interesting because I never really saw myself as a coach. Now, a practitioner again, right? I'm like, words are powerful. I believe that we speak our lives into existence. So I'm a practitioner. I put this stuff into practice. When I see a coach, my interactions with the coach, I hear their stories, but I don't necessarily see their process. You know what I mean? So for me, I'm a practitioner. Coach is one thing. I have nothing against coaches. I've paid for coaches. Coaches have totally blown my mind and really cracked things open for me. So absolutely. I'm in a different vein where I'm like, I'm a practitioner. I'm going to show you my work, right? I'm going to show you my work, and we're going to go through this together. It's going to be messy. It's not going to be polished. It's going to be real, though. And it's going to show you where I'm at, And so it's kind of like we're all in class together, you know what I mean? And so it's just an interesting thing for me to go through that. And I just put that out there for the full moon with releasing things, the snake with, like, transformation, still being the same entity, but in a different way. Like, I'm still the same real Zach Ollinger. I'm just not an IT guy. I'm not just creative. I'm an artist and a practitioner of these philosophies. And what does that mean? What's that relationship mean? Like, that's a whole different way of looking at myself and relating to myself. Now, what inspired all of this, what even got me writing my things and taking these notes and coming up with the stuff to say to do the live, is I received an email. I received data. Let's just go ahead and get into, like, the drawings here. We'll just kind of get into the practical part. I received data today, earlier this morning, from my insurance company that my bill is due, or coming due today or tomorrow, right? And I'm like, okay. And then I was like, wait, I checked my bank account, like, yesterday, and I'm like, I am pretty sure that the number in my bank account is less than the number that the number less than the number that's going to be on my insurance bill. And I'm like, okay. So I could feel that. Like, I really felt that in my, like, right here in my chest, my sternum, my solar plexus. And I was like, man, shit. Then I was like, okay, like, that's real. It's real that I have that obligation. That feeling inside of me is also very real. What's real at the same time, right, are these philosophies and practices that these philosophies that I practice and embody, about how I believe that my internal state is directly proportional to the experience that I have. And so I was like, okay, I have a choice here when I'm feeling this. These are real things. All of this data is true. I have a choice. I can choose to totally collapse into the anxiety and to just succumb to it and wallow in it and worry and just spin in it. I could do that. I've done that. There's nothing wrong with that. I'm not judging that. I'm just saying it's a choice, right? It's a choice. Or I could choose, and this choices work. I could choose to work on practicing. Okay, it's not just a choice, it's a choice to work. It's work either way. Like, your energy is being expended either way. If I choose to wallow in it and spin in it, I'm giving it mental space, I'm giving it energetic space, I'm giving it space in my body, either way. So I could either choose that, or I could choose to practice my philosophies to neutralize that feeling and work on having a more enjoyable experience of life, even though that data is real. Even though that data is real, it's not ignoring the facts. It's not abdicating or like trying to like get out of my obligations. It's none of that. It's about being like, you know what? Even though these things are true, I'm going to work on being centered and grounded, because that's where I can serve the best anyway. You know what I mean? Like that piece of data is not going to be the only data that comes to me today. You know what I mean? Like my kids want to play games. So am I going to bring back this anxiety? Am I going to bring back this worry, this internal frustration with myself? Like, am I going to allow that to blossom and bloom inside of me and become a resource that I'm building my now with? Hey kids, let me bring back this anxiety. Let's have some fun with that. Yeah, no thanks. I'm going to absolutely acknowledge that it exists. It's valid. It's there. Yep. That's there. That brick of anxiety, that's a fucking resource. Yet, I'm not going to build with that resource. That brick is not getting laid in the foundation of my now. I'm going to acknowledge it's here, it's present. It could be if I wanted it to be, and it might even be a little bit, but I'm not going to bring that whole thing into my now. And so that's what spawned this, right? So I've already been talking for like 10 minutes. So let's get into like the drawings, right? So I started thinking about like frequency, alignment, and attraction, and like how to visualize this, right? So here's a number of pages of my chicken scratches with this. So let's see how this works. All right, here. So this is still going to be like, there's a lot still to talk about. So all right, so let's see how this works. All right, so I started with this, and I apologize if it's all shaky. So I started with a sine wave, right? Because sine waves encompass a full cycle, a full up and a full down. And so a single experience would be from, say, this start point over here to this end point right here. And so I started to work with this a little bit, and I was working on figuring out how to do the creation triangle within the context of these waves. And I'll explain more of this too, right? So this, I've put that the new frequency is outside of the normal pattern. And so the normal pattern's the line, the baseline, right? So this is like where I'm at prior to the data coming in, right? So my baseline's here, the data, where this line intersects my baseline, that's where the data comes in. This sine wave is the data. So in this example that I was using, this is the information about the insurance bill becoming, okay, that is data. And it's moving me, this new frequency, right? This anxiety is outside of my normal. It's outside of my baseline. That information, that data caused me to, I'm allowing that to cause inside of me this anxiety, this frequency that's off my baseline, right? So this is a new frequency. And just so you guys know, I talk to myself, so I use we a lot because I actually talk back to myself, right? I answer myself. So if you see this or you hear it, it's not always just like me not using I statements. I literally conversate with myself. So I put here, let's see, that we must stretch ourselves, right? If we want to grow. We may find that we don't want to grow because this frequency right here could be a boundary. We could be like, yeah, I'm actually good with this, you know, like I'm actually good with how I vibrate with this data, you know, this how I respond to this data is actually in alignment. So we may not want to grow. We may not want to change, which is fine. But if we do choose to change and grow, then like, just like a snake, what we have to do, right, since this is the baseline, or what I have to do, is I've got to grow my mouth, right? I have to expand myself to be able to consume this new data, to integrate this frequency into my new baseline. Now, it's going to take work, right? But that's an idea, that's a visualization. And this is where I said, this is where we must be, or where we have an opportunity to be keepers. This is where we define the meaning, right? So this is where we get to, let me come back down here. Yeah, this is where I was trying to draw like the mouth of consuming that vibration. This is like our redefinition, right? The data is coming in and it's off our baseline. We have an opportunity to integrate, redefine, choose the meaning, so that way we could bring it back, integrate it, have a baseline for, so that way we can start. I mean, there's always going to be data. This thing is that this frequency, this data, it never ends. Like, this is a continuous expansion collapse all the time. And I'm going to get into that more about that's a representation of the ebb and flow of sex to bring things to life. Sorry, I'm going to change here. All right, so I went to this where I was defining things, right? So we've got, our baseline to our current relationship. This is where we are now. And then the data, like I was saying before, is the line. This is represents the data or the experience, right here. And this is what this is, our experience or the data of whatever it is. Like, again, the bill coming in, or just take anything. I had a couple more examples, earlier. But yeah, just take anything that's data coming into you or to me. And then the amplitude, like how far off base is this data taking me? And some people, I've used the word trigger, right? Like, this is triggering a response because I'm off center, so it's triggered like a response. So that may be accurate to put here. But the amplitude, how large of a charge do we have with this data, And then the wavelength, and I defined these things over here, right? So we've got frequency is like how many times are we encountering this data? How many times are we off base? And how far are we off base? How many times is that happening? So that's what the frequency is, right? So I put it down here where I was like, how are we experiencing this feeling, scenario, this context, this data? How often are we experiencing that? And the amplitude is how disturbing is the experience, how off base are we? And then the wavelength is the duration of time for us to move through the experience, from this over here to this. Although, as I was going through it, I realized that for a full cycle, for the both peak and valleys to be included, so it's really this right here not only represents like the amount of time to like transition from one to the other, but so the center could be time as well, but it's also in this context mainly the baseline of my emotional state or our emotional state. So then I put over here that this line is also a frequency, that the baseline is also a frequency, and I put like tiny little squiggles, right, to kind of represent like even this baseline is still a series of really tiny peaks and valleys, right? And then and then maybe this right here, maybe our baseline is a boundary, so that's what I was saying. Maybe we're in alignment with how we're responding to this data because of a boundary. And then let's see here. This one. So this is just like really big squiggles. So basically I put, this is the beginning of the story. Like if we listen to ourselves, we experience the data, and this is the beginnings of our story, right? If we were to tell somebody about this experience, if we were to tell somebody about this data, what's the language that we use? This is where we're going to start with that. And here's our explanation and what it basically it will tell us, like all of those details, like how frequently, how off base we might be, what's our language, what's our story around that. And then I was looking at like, if we go through these enough, like if we choose not to grow, our peak and valley, if it's something that actually does disturb us, the amplitude or that magnitude of that experience will remain the same. So if it's quite disturbing, we'll be disturbed or off base every time we experience it, or potentially it could get worse. Now, if we become conscious about it and we start to actually work with with integrating this frequency, changing our relationship to the data, and getting conscious about the meaning and being intentional about our relationship, we'll find that we start to baseline this, and that it becomes less and less disturbing to where it's no longer disturbing. And this is where balance, I wrote these like adjectives down, I think some are nouns: balance, silence, harmony, peace, centeredness, grounded, safety, connection, community, belonging. These are the things that come from a centered frequency. And the more wide and varied data that an individual is able to integrate and baseline, the bigger capacity and the larger container this individual is going to have. This plays a direct role in polarity and to attraction between the masculine and feminine energies. It's this right here, it's this baselining, because if we were to go, and I'm going to ask the feminine to forgive this example, so I'm kind of speaking to the men here in a way. If we were to say like, hey, you're hanging out on a Sunday, whatever, watching the game, and then something happens, you have some type of experience, like, and it doesn't matter like the gender of your partner, say there's some type of an emotional exchange over here, now you're off your baseline, right? Okay, something's happening. And a lot of times, men complain about this, like, whatever, blah, 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 something happened, like, my wife did this, or she's complaining about whatever, like, just whatever, right? And the whole idea, though, is that, if the masculine is grounded, it's going to understand that this data exists, and it's going to become baseline. And a strong, grounded masculine is able to contain wild expressions, the unknowns, which is what I was saying earlier in the other video with the two triangles, if you happen to catch that one. How can I see myself in the data? Because again, the thing is, men, is that we have feminine energy too. And the feminine energy likes to express itself. So as you're watching that game, you're probably hooting and hollering for your team. You're probably raising some ruckus, whatever. And I'll tell you what, that's like over here. That's not centered. That's not grounded. That's not baseline. That's an expression. That's an expression, dude. So you are in your feminine when you're all yelling and hooping and hollering. And so that's the thing, is that like, can your feminine partner contain that? How is she handling that? Has she baselined that, normalized that? Is that a thing for her? Is that a trigger for her? You know what I mean? Like, so these things, it's not just, like everything is involved here. This push and pull, this ebb and flow, this mix. So anyway, this down here is a bunch of squiggles. I was just trying to figure out how to like show the baselining again. This was a strange thing in a way that I was trying to show like the, maybe I can draw it. I was going to see if I can demonstrate this while I was doing it. So what I was doing is like, we'll take that, right? And then I was doing this, right? But then there was also, I believe, this. Anyway, more or less what I was trying to do, if you can kind of start to see it, is that like this point here, and then I drew another like sine wave over here, and then the circle, right? And so it's just kind of like, okay, how do I tie in like the yin yang or yin yang, however you want to say it, kind of idea, right? The polarity, the masculine, feminine, like it's evident, right? You know what I mean? You can start to see it. So there's this pulsation of creation. And let's see, the last one here. So I was working with trying again to show, and this kind of illustrates it. I don't think this is a complete idea. So what I was doing again is taking that experience, that data, and doing one full cycle, one up, one down, right? And doing the triangle, the creation triangle. And what I was showing here is that this is data, right? So here I am, experiencing data. It's taking me off base. And here is a triangle, right here at the top, inside of this little loop. And I said, this triangle is a reflection of my relationship to the data, and I said, the question becomes, is this relationship to this data in alignment with our truth or my truth? So basically this triangle right here doesn't even exist. Remember, this is the one, this is from the data. This is the triangle from the data. This doesn't exist. It's a reflection. That triangle right there is a reflection of this triangle. And that's the one I'm bringing back, right? I'm bringing back this triangle. I'm bringing that back and reflecting it back into, I'm making, this triangle is what I'm making this data mean. You know, so the conflict or the disturbance, the off balance is actually happening right here. Right? This is, again, a good illustration. It's below the line. You can also, it's subconscious, right? This pattern here, if I'm not being intentional in my own gatekeeper and defining my meaning and context, this is going to be a subconscious pattern, and it's going to be reflected back, and it's going to absolutely define my relationship to this data. Now, when I come back down, like if I realize, once I realize that my response to this is inside of me, then I can come back, right? And create a new experience with, and then again, like I'm not quite here yet, this integration, right? This new experience of like integrating it. Although, like I said, I'm not completely done like figuring all that out. Yeah, and I said the center right here is our relationship to ourselves and our consciousness, our choice and our potential. This is where we can choose. This is where we have the opportunity right here to redefine and integrate. You know, once we come here, this is like, once we transcend this triangle, we can arrive at a new point to work with. Again, I'm not done. I don't know yet the rest of the data or integrating it. Not sure. So again, I was just trying to figure out a good way to like illustrate or use triangles with like the sign to make various points. So yeah, and whoop, there goes a page. And there's a reason too. The White Lotus, I use White Lotus Apps as a company name that I have, and then why I have the shirt. This is from the Avatar, The Last Airbender, but there's real philosophy behind, the White Lotus. If you look up the symbolism, so there's a reason that these things are here, And so I'm just putting it out there, and I'm really tempted to put this kind of stuff on LinkedIn as well. That's a very big stretch for me because that whole audience is like entirely different, yet it would be a real declaration energetically on my part to state to the universe like, hey, I'm shifting, I'm changing, I've molted this identity and I'm still the same except for I'm different. I'm different as well. So I'm approaching my talents, my skills, and how I create what I do to attract perhaps finances and income, and what I'm available for, how I contribute. All of these things are being redefined, and I feel like I am making very profound energetic declarations right now and going forward. And that definitely has its own frequency. You know what I mean? It's its own thing. One thing I do that I didn't, how do I want to say? I was going to illustrate this, and I thought I had a better... Well, so basically what I was going to do is like to illustrate with masculine and feminine again, just to kind of illustrate the pulsating of the sexual exchange in a way, right? So it doesn't necessarily matter who's on top, right? If she's on top to come down to receive, he thrusts up to penetrate. Or the other way, inverse, comes down to penetrate, opens up to receive, and then thrusts up to receive. So there's basically this whole this whole creation cycle. Again, it's not meant to be vulgar, or it's just a symbolism. It's a symbolism. It creates life. And again, it's not gender specific. It's simply energetic principles. Just energy. Energy doesn't care. Energy does not care. So it's not meant to be. Yeah. It's a very natural thing. And so just to illustrate it in the context of creation, co-creation, law of attraction, manifestation, just basically relationship to life. So that's where I'm at with it. So I've spoken for a long time. Again, I don't know how long. I appreciate you being here and for sticking with me, and for just for journeying with me. I really appreciate it very much. Yeah. All right. I'm just going to drop in real quick here. All right. I love you guys. Thank you again. Thanks for being here, and thanks for journeying with me. Thank you for the time. This was probably about a half hour, so I really appreciate it. Thanks for entertaining my not fully it's rough. It's totally rough. Thank you for being with me on an on-the-fly journey. Thank you for allowing me to share my process with you. It's actually a real gift. So thank you so much. So, all right, I'm not sure what next. I'm gonna check in with the boys and see what's up. All right. I love you guys. I'll talk to you later.